Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Lemarier, and I'm the current CEO of Mickaboo Companion Bird Rescue. The topic today is a focus on our efforts to help the wild parrots of San Francisco and provide some insight into our activities there, some of the themes that we're seeing, and just provide some general awareness of the work that is happening there and ways that it can be supported. And also just a little bit of information to support public education, as this is a great opportunity to do that. And perhaps now that there are official animal, this might be something that we consider doing on a not super frequent, but perhaps regular cadence to continue sharing information about them and their welfare. I'm going to start with a very small number of slides about Mickaboo, just for anyone who's not familiar with the organization, but I will quickly move into discussing the wild parrots as they are the focus of today's topic. But to provide a little context around the organization, as we are helping the sick and injured members of the wild flock, we've been around for just over 25 years, and we are a completely volunteer organization. We're a 501c3. We don't have a building or a facility. We're a network of foster homes. So at any given time, obviously, as birds are taken in and adopted, our foster home population fluctuates a little bit, but it tends to go between about 130 to 170 active foster homes. And those are caring for currently over 450 foster birds in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. So we have fosters active south of here down to Monterey area and a little bit beyond, and also all the way up to Sacramento Valley. And depending on the need and what we're able to accommodate in any given year, we've taken anything in from 150 birds a year up to north of 350 when we've had some larger rescue situations happen. There's lots of information about our organization on our website, mickaboo.org, and if you are interested in learning more about us, there's a lot there. So I'm going to try and keep it pretty light today to get into the main topic. But we have a great cohort of volunteers that keep the organization running. And we're also very well connected to other reputable parrot sanctuaries and rescues. There is a group called the Parrot Conservation Alliance, which is a network of GFAS accredited sanctuaries and rescues that those sanctuaries nominate. And we're very pleased to be part of that network. It provides ongoing collaboration, education, and awareness around best practices for what is a fairly specialized animal to care for. And so we were very pleased to be invited to join that organization when it was founded 4 years ago. And that's provided some great resources for us as well. And I think is a reflection of our good standing across the country. It's not all glamorous work. There is a lot of going into very unsanitary conditions and helping birds in deplorable conditions. But our volunteers do it with great commitment, and we're grateful for that. And the topic today, of course, is our friends in San Francisco. So let me begin by providing a little context around the flock in San Francisco and the wider Bay Area. So in the Bay Area, to the best of our knowledge at this time, there are 3 active flocks of wild parrots. So obviously today we're focusing on San Francisco, but let's not forget that just down 101 a little bit, we have another couple of flocks that are active. We have a small flock in Palo Alto and another flock in Sunnyvale. These are not completely the same. The flock in San Francisco consists of hybrids between the mitered parakeet and the red-masked parakeet. And in Palo Alto and Sunnyvale, whilst it's very similar, there is a slight tendency to have the population a little bit more mitered. So the mitered parakeet traits are much more prevalent in those birds. They're a little bit larger and they have more of the mitered pattern. And their vocalizations are a little different. So whilst they might look very similar at first glance, they are not exactly the same, which is interesting because they're not that far away, but the population does show a discernible difference. In terms of population numbers, we'll talk about San Francisco in a minute. Palo Alto, I don't have a number for, but I suspect it is the smallest of the 3 flocks. And then in San Jose and Sunnyvale, we did do a count in 2023, and our best guess is that there's approximately 35 parrots in that flock. But that was a one-off count. It would be great to do some more to get more confident about those numbers. This is a photograph showing pretty much all of the wild flock of San Francisco taken in 2021. I don't think the numbers have changed substantially since then. I particularly like this picture because it was taken at the roost at sunrise during the winter months. So of course, in the poplar trees there, it's very easy to see the individuals. This is pretty much the whole flock. This is early February before nesting season begins. So they're all pretty much coming back to the roost. And pretty standard approach for counting larger groups of birds is to attempt to group them into groups of 10. So if you do that in this graphic, you come up with something approaching 220 birds. I'm going to talk a little bit about the main reasons why they come into rescue now. Obviously, when they're healthy and happy and flying around in the city, we're very happy for them to be there, and we hope that we don't see them. But when they do get sick or injured, members of the public will find them on the ground and bring them to San Francisco Animal Shelter. And that's usually when we come into play, when we'll get a message that there is a new parrot that looks like it's from the wild flock. And we, most of the time, are able to attend within 12 hours to pick up the bird and get it straight to medical care. I've kind of grouped the main causes of injury and illness into 4, starting with the most common reason that we see the birds coming into rescue. Unfortunately, that is rat poison, specifically bromethalin poisoning, and I'm going to talk about that in a few following slides a little bit later on. Definitely, we're keen to help with public education around that because it would vastly lower the amount of rescue load that we see coming in from San Francisco wild flock. Secondly, we'll see birds with physical trauma, and that's usually from some high-speed impact with a building, a car, or the ground, perhaps evading a predator, or just having an unfortunate accident. That can lead to broken wings or spines, legs or hip fractures, broken tails, or facial injuries. We will see a little bump in September because that is when the new babies of the year will fledge. So the nesting season runs through June, July, August, and in September we'll see babies starting to jump out of nest even in late August. And depending on how the fledging season goes and the weather at the time and a number of other external factors, we'll see anything from 1 to 4 babies in a year. And then sometimes there will be victims that were clearly the result of a predator attack. They will have puncture wounds and physical trauma consistent with predator attack. Sometimes the birds survive that and are found struggling on the ground and are taken to the shelter. All of these obviously require immediate medical care. So every single bird that we take in from these scenarios has to go straight to a vet and is often hospitalized for a period of time. I'm going to give a small number of examples of some of these. I've done presentations where we've talked more about the individuals. I don't think that's necessarily the big focus here, but a few examples of each just to give you some idea of what that looks like in practice. I have a couple of birds here, Julian and then Zelly, who had leg fractures. We are able to get the birds into casts and those can be healed. It often results in reduced mobility. So the bird would not thrive in the wild after that kind of injury most of the time, but they can still have great quality of life once the leg has healed up. So we have a couple of examples of that. Zelly was a younger bird who most likely was less than a year old when this happened. Then I have an example of a predator attack. This photograph was taken by a member of the public who noticed this bird at their windowsill. They were putting food out for the wild animals, wild birds, and the parrots obviously find that. Mushy had been attacked by a hawk, and you can see that there is a hole right through the top of the beak on the upper beak, which is a result of being grabbed by the hawk. But Mushy was able to get away, and this member of the public was able to pick up the bird and get them to us for help. And Mushy has fully recovered from her injuries. She has a slightly deformed upper beak, but it has grown back quite nicely, and she's doing very well in foster care. And then we have a couple of examples of hospitalized birds, Hattie and Bowley. You can see that they're on a flannel base, and they're not perching normally as you would expect. They're staying very low to the ground, and they're not able to hold themselves up. And this is a classic example of what a bird looks like after exposure to bromethalin. So the birds that come in that have been exposed to rat poison, they will often have problems with holding their head up straight. They will eat more slowly, move more slowly. They would not be able to fly straight. And they may have problems gripping with their feet, and their digestive system is often affected and can be much slower to process food. So there's a lot of symptoms that are pretty distinctive, and we've learned to recognize them with the avian vets. Unfortunately, there's no test that we can perform on a living bird that would confirm the presence of bromethalin. That is really only possible if they have passed away and we're able to take tissue samples. I'll talk about that a little bit more in an upcoming slide. And then we have the babies. This is an example of a baby that came in after being attacked by a crow. They had grabbed it by the foot and caused injury to their feet. And so they had to have a little foot wrap for a while to help their feet with getting back into the right shape, and a little bit of physio just to try and get their foot moving again as it should. That was effective. And this baby was able to grow his tail back and get his feet working again, and was able to perch normally after a number of weeks and some physio and physical therapy. It's normal for us to see about 1 to 4 babies every year. This year, we actually had 9, which was an extremely large number, quite an unusual. I'm hoping it was just a freak of statistics and circumstances, and that we're not going to see a continuing rise in trend in that way. We did have a number of babies that came in without their tails, very close together. So we're wondering if perhaps a nest fell, and the babies were then spotted by the public in quick succession, or maybe there was a predator attack related to that. We're hoping that some of these may be releasable, but it's a little bit early for us to know for sure. But yeah, this was a really unfortunate year for the wild parrots, in that we had a much larger intake this year compared to normal figures. So 9 babies and actually 20 birds in total in 2023, which is really statistically significant to us. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I have some numbers in an upcoming slide. But getting back to bromethalin, just to provide a little bit more context around the impact that's having on the birds that are affected and exposed. I've got a couple of slides here just to focus on that. It's so significant for us because well over half of the birds that we have coming into us from the shelter, from the wild flock, appear consistently to be showing symptoms of bromethalin exposure. So they've ingested rat poison somehow. The bromethalin exposure, it's a neurotoxin, so it creates a pattern of brain damage that can vary depending on how much they ingested and which part of the brain is affected. But it's not really something that they can be cured of. They can stabilize depending on how much they were exposed to, and they may be able to improve their physical ability to perch and move a little bit, but they're never going to be releasable. They would not survive in the wild. Even if they survive the poisoning, the damage from the neurotoxin is just going to leave lasting mobility issues that would mean they couldn't survive outside again. Of the birds that we take in, the survival rate is approximately 50% amongst the population that show symptoms of bromethalin poisoning. So obviously there are some birds which would never even make it to the shelter. If they ingest too much of it, they would be dead on the ground before anyone could see them and pick them up and take them to the shelter. So these numbers aren't absolute. I'm sure there are birds that are just succumbing to bromethalin poisoning in the city, and we don't know how many there could be. But of the birds that we take in every year, those that show bromethalin symptoms, about 50% are surviving. This is not something that we can determine immediately. When they come in on top of the exposure to bromethalin, they're usually very dehydrated. You know, they haven't been thriving for a little while, so they're in very poor condition. After fluids and a period of being able to feed them again and really get a better idea of their internal issues. It can be up to 3 months before we know if they will survive. They will usually be able to eat on their own in a lot of cases, but depending on the extent of the damage caused by the neurotoxin, they may eventually begin having seizures, and that usually leads to them passing away. At the 3-month mark, if they are really not thriving, we'll often see a decrease in their capacity to maintain their own weight by eating, and that is one of the big indicators to us that they are declining, at which point we'll discuss euthanasia with the avian vet, and they're either humanely euthanized or sometimes they would pass away from a seizure by themselves before that can happen. So there's a 3-month window where we just don't know if they're going to make it in most cases. And for that period, they need to be hospitalized because they're very fragile. They may or may not be able to maintain their own weight at times. They are at risk of seizures, and it's not really something we can easily accommodate in foster care. So that means that for every bird, they are at least going to be in the hospital for 3 months, and the cost of that for us is approximately $3,500. So we are at the moment taking on the burden of ensuring that they get that care. The cost of medications and treatments is additional on top of that. That's just the day rate, if you like, of having them in hospital. As the numbers have continued over the years to see the birds with these symptoms, we got really to the point where we wanted to invest in a study to truly identify the cause of the toxin and the issue. There was a lot of speculation years ago that the birds were somehow being exposed to roundworm through, I've heard theories about, ingesting raccoon feces and other ways that they were getting roundworm. We do a necropsy on every single wild parrot that passes away in our care, and we've never found evidence of roundworm. That would be very clear in necropsy when the avian vet takes a look. We've never seen evidence of that in the brain or anywhere else. So that's why we began funding the study to do bromethalin testing. The paper was finally published in 2019. But that was after 4 years of becoming much more rigorous about how we collect the feces when the birds are first taken into the shelter, and a protocol for getting that frozen and over to the vet to send away to the labs for the research around testing. The issue with the birds is they're so small that tests that have worked to detect bromethalin in larger animals do not really work on the samples so small in these birds. And so they came up with a new high-performance liquid chromatography process that was specially devised for dealing with these small samples. And so this paper was the final evidence, if you like, that we know it's bromethalin that is causing these symptoms and poisoning the birds. After the paper came out in March of 2019, we did request a discussion with the city, and we spoke with Dr. Chris Geiger, who confirmed that the city's only using bromethalin in the sewers. We can only guess, but based on what we know, we would imagine that the main risk of exposure to bromethalin for the wild parrots is individuals just privately using rat poison on the top of apartment buildings and such. It's freely purchasable online in large containers in pellet form. It's obviously designed to look like food. And we suspect there could be a lot of people who are just scattering these pellets without using bait stations or any other measures. And then also in the city, there are people feeding the parrots on the top of their buildings and apartments. And so for the birds, some of this is food, some of it is poison. They're just landing down and eating what they find. So It's entirely feasible that it could just be through private use and the birds discovering it in loose form on the tops of buildings as they fly around the city. We would love to see an information campaign just to help the public understand the effect that it has on the wildlife. If it's affecting the parrots, it's almost certainly affecting other birds and potentially other wildlife as well. Um, and it's a human problem. It's not a natural issue. And so we're hoping that we could see an effective education campaign to help tackle this and see if we can prevent this problem from continuing. I know in November, Raptors Are the Solution, RATS, as an organization presented. They have some great materials and they do great work about educating the public around alternatives and not using rat poison. There are very effective, more effective alternatives, following sterilization techniques instead of poisoning. And there's some great materials that they're providing around that. So that's another avenue that we'd like to see shared and advocated for with the public. Just to provide a small sample of a couple of case studies of birds where they have had exposure to bromethalin but are still having a quality of life. Whilst some of the birds need hospitalization for longer periods of time, we have many that have successfully thrived in foster homes and been adopted. We do our best to pair them up because we feel strongly that as flock animals, they should have one of their own kind. They are, of course, individuals and they need to pick their friend. So we have to play a bit of a matchmaking game to find out who wants to get along with who. But once they have a friend, we will do our best to place them in experienced foster homes and even find them potentially an adopter. Beal and clay are more wobbly. They do need to be on towels because they are prone to falling. But they are still enjoying a great quality of life. They are able to express agency around the kind of toys they like to play with, the kind of treats that they enjoy, the kind of food that they like to eat, and when and how they like to take their baths. And even though they're a little bit wobbly, they still enjoy coming out of their cage and being active. Sansom and Dewey are a pair that were successfully adopted. They are able to fly a little bit, so they have been well socialized by their adopter, and they also enjoy a great quality of life and remain really active, even though they probably wouldn't keep up with the wild flock outside. I'm going to skip over the videos in the interest of time. Some numbers. Just put in a few numbers. This is total since Mickaboo began taking in the wild parrots over a 20-year period. In our database, the first documented wild parrot is 2003. I know that there were a small number before that that Mickaboo at that time would have helped with, but these numbers go back to 2003. We've had a total of 236 intakes over that time. We have 82 that have passed away in our care. So I would say that the vast majority of those were bromethalin poisoning cases, the ones that did not survive on the side of the 50-50 odds. We've had 64 that have been successfully adopted. We have 26 that are currently still in our foster care, and we have 21 in the hospital. And that includes a significant number of the babies from this year. We also have 37 that have been released back to the wild flock. It's not something that we're able to do very often because most of these birds just do not regain 100% mobility. But as and when we do get a couple that are able to get back to 100% health, we don't want them to live a life of captivity if they don't have to. So if we are able to return them back to the wild flock, then we will do that. We do have a protocol around it. They spend time acclimating in an outdoor aviary, and we do a full suite of tests to ensure that we're not introducing any new diseases to the flock. It's really important to us that that would never happen. So we screen for a lot of common viral and other infectious diseases before any bird would be released back to the flock. Last year was a record year in all the ways that we don't like to see. We had 20 wild parrots come in, which is significantly higher than the 10 to 15 we usually expect to see. A part of that, I think, was a bad fledging season where we had 9 babies coming in, which is about double what we would expect. And we had relatively more physical trauma injuries. We don't know the reason for that, but given that it's just one bad year, it's too early to say that there's a trend here or a problem. But we are aware that a lot of trees came down in the storms last year, and the trees around the roosting park, Subreman Park, where the parrots roost, do provide shelter for the parrots during hawk attacks. And it's possible that having fewer trees near their roost is impacting them in that way, where they don't have other trees to take refuge in or use for evasive maneuvers. But that's a little bit speculative, and we don't really know if that's going to be a trend that we see continue. So we're going to have to watch this space and see what happens. So as we head into 2024, we are really starting to feel the strain with 21 birds in the hospital, and trying to find specialized foster homes that are prepared and trained to care for them outside of hospital. Some of the birds can be placed in experienced foster homes, but some of them still have ongoing medical issues, and it is a difficult thing to navigate, and it's an expensive thing to navigate. Proportionally, most years, the number of birds that we're taking in overall, in terms of all of the birds surrendered to us across all species of parrot, including the wild flock. The wild flock are really only at most going to be 5 to 10% of that population, but from a cost perspective, they are more like 25% or more in any given month of our overall costs. So they are an expensive species to be caring for us. We are getting to the point where we're struggling to keep up with the current trends. If we have another year like last year with 20 new intakes, things are going to get very challenging for us. So financially, we do want to be smart about this and try and establish partnerships with other groups that take in wildlife. We know that Wild Care and Peninsula Humane Society have cared for wild parrots in one-off circumstances from the Sunnyvale flock and from other scenarios in the past. And I think creating a wider network that extends our capacity, especially for the official animal of the city, we want to make sure they have a proper safety net that can handle the burden. So rather than attempting to shoulder it alone stoically, I think we need to build out partnerships and programs with other groups that can help ensure we'll always have the capacity no matter what is happening. We also have the opportunity to do a genetic study with UCSF. One of our volunteers actually runs a genetics lab there, and we've begun exploring what would be possible there to better understand the genetics of the flock, which could help us with understanding their health issues, how they're being exposed to bromethalin, perhaps with more accuracy, and over time, understand how genetics are, how the flock is evolving, and its relationship to the other flocks in the vicinity. So that's exciting. We're excited about seeing where that goes, but it's very early days right now. There's really nothing to share at this stage beyond our excitement for it. So as I'm wrapping up with the material here, if anyone's interested in helping, we certainly would gladly accept more help and support. First and foremost, if you live in the city and you're enjoying seeing the flock there, our first request would be that you let the wild parrots be wild. If they're flying to your window, if you have a bird feeder or your balcony, by all means, if you're feeding the wildlife, they will take advantage of that, but please don't approach them, feed them, or attempt to tame them in any way and socialize them with your hands. You know, as Mark Bittner said when he left Telegraph Hill, the biggest danger to this wild flock is people. So if we can keep them away from windows and people and keep them outside where they belong, that is going to keep them the happiest and healthiest. If you are interested in helping with our foster population, we would love to expand our network of experienced foster homes that can look after these wonderful, charming animals. We have a free bird care class for anyone that does have birds and is just generally looking to understand how to better provide them with enrichment and good husbandry. Certainly don't use rat poison because that is deeply affecting the sick and injured birds that we're having to care for. We're always happy to see more volunteers joining the group. You know, outside of the work we do with the wild flock, we'd love to see strategies to reduce how many birds are being sold in pet stores. We've seen a huge number of budgies coming in after the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of people bought budgies, and now that people are moving around again, they're surrendering them, and a lot of them have allowed them to multiply. And budgies have definitely been the big victim of COVID-19 from our perspective. So we would love to see people adopting instead of sponsoring the captive pet bird industry, which we're not a big fan of. Many of you might have heard that the 4K remaster of the Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill is coming out and is actually playing at the Roxy this coming week, starting tomorrow. We will have a Mickaboo trailer, which does talk about rat poison and as just a little infomercial before the movie begins. And we're very grateful that that's been possible. So we're trying to do our best for public education on that front. And the film looks fantastic. Personally, I was involved in the restoration and the remastering. So this is a bit of a passion project for me, and I'm very excited to see it come to fruition. And we have more resources here. This deck, I think, is going to be available after the meeting. And so we have some links in here to other resources if these topics have been of interest to you. We've included some other organizations which are also doing wild parrot rescue and rehab down in Southern California, where they have many more species of wild parrot. So I think that's me over time, and I will wrap it up there so that we can move to any questions.
Great, thank you for your presentation. Adding to it, I did want to mention that yes, to anyone who's listening to the meeting or attending the meeting, that the presentation will be on the website either later tonight or definitely by tomorrow morning. And by tomorrow afternoon, we'll have a video of the meeting, including Sarah's wonderful presentation. So that'll be available to view again. And you can also download it as well if you want to share it or if you want to, whatever you want to do with the video. It will be available tomorrow afternoon. Thanks, Sarah, for the presentation. I was wondering, before we open it up to questions from the other commissioners and also to public comment, can you talk a little bit more about tomorrow's event at the Roxy?
Yeah, of course. So tomorrow and Saturday, Mark Bittner and Judy Irving will be at the screenings, and there will be a Q&A after the movie. So they'll be there beforehand, talking to people as everyone's arriving. We'll be there too. We're going to bring a couple of wild parrots with us. We don't want to overwhelm them, overwhelm the people. So, but we will bring a couple, and we'll have a presence there. We'll be taking part in the Q&A. So yeah, Friday and Saturday, Mark and Judy will be there, and Mickaboo will be there too. And the screenings are running daily through January 18th.
Okay, great. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Let's open it up to questions or comments from the commissioners. Is there anyone who would like to? Okay, Commissioner Ozanoy, please.
First of all, thank you for an amazing presentation. I just have a quick question, whether for the birds that are released, if you ban them so that you can track them in any way or have any kind of data as to, yeah, if they end up back with you again or anything like that.
That's a great question. We don't ban them. I think bans would be problematic. They could pose a safety risk to the birds in terms of getting them caught on things as they're flying around. So we wouldn't put a ban on them. But what we have been thinking about is microchipping the birds. Microchips have advanced over the years, and they are now super, super small, small enough to be the size of a grain of rice or smaller, which means that for birds the size of conures, they are absolutely candidates for microchipping now, which, you know, wasn't the case going back some years. And the chips are becoming very affordable. So I think we're at the point where we are considering chipping birds before release because the costs are becoming manageable relative to the other costs around their care. And it would help us understand, especially for the babies, because their physical presentation changes a lot over time, would allow us to identify birds that are coming back in for a second round if something happens to them. To the best of our knowledge, we've only had one repeat customer. We had a bird that came in sick. I don't have the years, but they were released, and 2 years after we released them, they came back in sick again. And at that point, we treated them. They're now in foster care, and we're not planning to re-release that bird because it feels too likely that they would probably not thrive once again. It was simple infection, nothing contagious to the other birds, but that bird just wasn't thriving. So there's only one bird we know of that has been a repeat customer to date, but microchips would allow us to be a bit more definitive about that.
And thank you so much. And then generally speaking, babies, are they usually releasable if there's nothing dramatically wrong beyond, trauma or whatever? Does the flock accept them?
Yeah, yes and yes. By most years, we see up to 4 babies, and about half of them are releasable. So that makes up most of the population that we are able to release. Yeah, they're accepted back by the flock. They're recognized. We would not release the bird unless we had a very significant number of the population around. We used to use private residences where there were fire escapes and such, where we knew the birds were frequenting. But more recently, we've been doing that at the roost because it's really just the safest for the birds. It's a bit less comfortable for us because it's a more public place. We're not trying to attract attention, but it's the best for the birds. So more recently, we've been releasing them at the roost where everybody is there and they have a little bit of a chance to reintroduce themselves before the flock takes off.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Van Hine, please.
Just out of curiosity, have you compared sizes of these animals and body condition scores to the ones in Peru and Ecuador, and whether or not there's any variation on environment and diet that's different?
That's a fascinating question. No, we have not. But that's certainly something that would be fascinating to learn more about. Honestly, most of the resources we have been able to muster have been focused on bromethalin and how to deal with just handling the current load that's coming our way. But through our connections with the wider Rescue Alliance, a couple of those members are operating in Central America doing conservation efforts, and there's a lot of interest in better understanding the native population. So it could be possible for us to get some data about that through them. That's not something that we've been actively pursuing at this time. I think widening our support network to make sure we continue to be a safety net for the sick and injured members of the flock is kind of our priority, but I like that question. I'm going to make a note about it.
One other one, given the foraging behavior of this species, are there any specific bromethalin products that might be more problematic in terms of their attraction to it?
I think I'll caveat my answer with the fact that a lot of this is just personal speculation, but we find that the wild parrots adapt very well to the aspect of their diet we offer in pellet form. They're very intelligent and adaptable, and obviously they get daily fresh food as part of their diet in our care, but we do include pellets to make sure that they get the full nutritional component that they need. And they're pretty good about adapting to that. A lot of the bromethalin poisons are sold in pellet form. They vary in color and shapes and sizes, but the birds are naturally curious. They're foragers by nature, and I would imagine that that pellet form would be something that they would readily explore.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Reed?
Well, I just wanted to say, I know that the Friends of SF Animal Care and Control gives a donation to Mickaboo every year. And I was going to wonder if the commission would look into possibly having the San Francisco Park Alliance possibly make a donation to Mickaboo, since these birds do thrive in our parks. I mean, I'm assuming they take care of the bison somehow, either the Park and Rec or through the nonprofit. I was wondering if we could send out a letter from this commission asking them to consider starting to make a donation to Mickaboo to help support the medical care of these birds.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that particular alliance. I don't know if Commissioner Tobin knows anything about them or.
The zoo takes care of the bison.
SF
yeah.
do.
The SF Zoo takes care of the
Yeah,
bison.
Zoo does, but Parks Alliance was a fundraising arm for Rec and Park. So a lot of programs that person could donate directly to SF Parks Alliance for the tax deduction and earmark it for a particular fund. So it's not a bad idea to have a fund available earmarked for the parrots. I'm not sure. I mean, I was thinking about that as well too. If you have this bird as a what is it, the city bird you mentioned, Sarah, that they are the city's official bird? Where it's
Official animal.
official animal, right? If there's any kind of funding, like I wonder what the state quail gets and so on and so forth. I don't really know how that is supported or how those conservation efforts for that particular significant animal for the city. I really don't know, but it's worth exploring. I can find out more by asking Rec and Park. Anybody else have ideas of who else might be supporting?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure, but thanks for that insight and also for your suggestion too, because yeah, that does, how does this work into the whole, the whole official animal thing as far as, I mean, I'm assuming there must be some resources or something else that's devoted
Right.
towards, but yeah, so maybe something we can look into.
Right.
But thanks for
And
bringing.
also just, Michael, thanks for bringing that up, but Friends of Animal Care and Control, you can also do the same thing that you would do with Parks Alliance, which is designate the grant that you're giving the Friends of Animal Care and Control, the donation is intended for Mickaboo. And and go so far as to say the parrots, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, in general, Mickaboo is a fully volunteer-run organization. It's going to the immediate need of the animals.
Yeah, over 95% of our funds are spent on veterinary care. We have our founder is a registered vet tech, and medical care for birds that we take in is really a big focus for us. A lot of them haven't received it to date, or are being surrendered because of medical issues. So yeah, it's something that we have a lot of resources and knowledge around, and I think it's why we stepped in to care for the wild parrots.
Mhm.
And on that note, I have a question, which I didn't get a chance to include in my slides, but it occurred to me as we talked about Parks and Rec. We have, on occasion, met staff in the parks when we've been there just observing the birds. And I know they do find deceased birds in the parks, just in the course of maintaining the parks. We've never discussed it to date, but we might be interested in being able to recover any deceased individuals that they find for necropsy testing and the genetic study. If we could, it's a little bit morbid to talk about, but it could help us in terms of gathering information and understanding the health of the wild flock. So if it's possible to receive those, that might be something that could be very informative for us in terms of the overall flock's health and care.
Okay.
I can reach out to our representative on the commission from that department and see. Now, when you mentioned about the deceased, are you talking specifically about parrots or?
Yeah, deceased parrots.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
let me-
Obviously, and I don't know what the numbers are there, but even just knowing what those numbers are would be informative. You know, how many are, are passing away in the parks, and what the causes of that are versus being caught by predators or other scenarios.
Yeah, and I remember we kind of talked about that a couple of days ago when we met. So thanks. Yeah, let me look into it. I don't mind looking into it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Van Horn? Okay.
I was just going to say, I know like from volunteering at the shelter, like Caltrans brings in deceased animals, but I've actually never heard of SF Park and Rec bringing in deceased animals. So it'd be interesting to see what because I mean, they obviously get raccoons and other animals also, but it'd be interesting to know what they actually do with deceased animals.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Commissioner Van Horn?
You had implied in the presentation that one of the challenges these birds have are secure nesting areas and finding places where they wouldn't be predated on by the hawks and such. I know in California and throughout the West, we've done the barn owl projects where we actually figured out exactly what type of roosting, nesting facilities they need, and we provide that so that they can be sort of a natural pest control. I know with the cherry heads that nobody really wants to publicize where they're nesting to keep the public from messing with them and that sort of thing. But has thought ever been given to providing some sort of artificial safe place for them?
No, I don't feel that that's a pressing issue. As cavity nesters, I think there are plenty of trees in the city where they're finding acceptable nesting places. I've also seen anecdotal stories about them finding other cavities that they're able to nest in. So I don't think they're running out of safe places to nest. I mean, it's common for young fledglings leaving the nest to be easy prey for larger birds and predators that happen to come across them when they're still fledging and are at higher risk. So I don't think that's a serious threat to the population. They're pretty adaptable, and I don't think they're running out of nesting spots.
Thank
I think
you.
that, yeah,
sorry.
to clarify my earlier comment about the trees in the park, I think that's more cover for them under hawk attack, to give them places to take cover or to escape to if a hawk is attacking the flock. So they have a reduced number of options in terms of trees in the park, since a lot of the trees came down at the Embarcadero.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Oh, yes, did I hear? Okay, seeing none, we can open up for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment? Please approach the podium at this time.
Hi, Nadine May. Sarah, thank you very much for your presentation. There are a couple of things I'm wondering about. Have you tracked what areas of the city the birds are coming in with being affected by rat poison? And I specifically asked that because I have feral cat colonies in Chinatown. Rats are a big problem in Chinatown. And my microphone just fell apart.
Oh, no.
And Chinatown is a very sort of isolated community where very often the word does not necessarily get out to the community about things that other parts of the city might know. And I'm wondering whether there could be a specific, targeted campaign if the birds are coming from specific areas of the city to get the information out to those areas of the city about rat poison, because it's super important.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question. We do get information about where the birds are found the shelter give us papers, discharge papers, like they would any animal, and that includes cross streets on where they were located or reported by the public. And we save that information. We haven't noticed anything that appears significant in terms of hotspots that are, certain parts of the city. I would say that the effect of the poison is not instant. So, they're going to go foraging every single day and move around the city, covering a number of miles just as part of their daily activities, foraging morning and afternoon. So we see patterns where it's areas closer to the park where they roost. But they've been in the Mission, they've been out at Fort Mason, they've been, they cover the whole city depending on what's in season and time of year, and different routes that they explore and determine a preference for, which is all really foraging related. So I think the use of the pellets is going to potentially be more sporadic and less predictable, and they would just encounter them as they are on their usual foraging routes. So we don't have any clues as to certain parts of the city where this could be at a greater likelihood of happening. There's nothing that gives us a sense that there are certain communities or parts of the city that we target with that message.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for a very interesting presentation, very worthwhile. Excuse me. I was wondering, I think this is all the more reason to try to get, I know it's a long shot, and we've tried this before, but to get pet stores to stop selling live animals, because I know there's one store, I think it was called Animal Connection. I think it's over in the Sunset, or it was on Judas Street. I don't know if it's still there. They sold all kinds of parrots. Of course, they want to sell parrots because they can command a high price. And I know one person bought a parrot because his friend had got a parrot, and he was giving the parrot like bird seed, and the parrot, anyway, I helped him find a new home. He literally gave away the bird and the cage, which is probably several $100s worth of bird and cage. He was so desperate to get rid of the bird because he saw that, it was very high maintenance and made a lot of noise. And so, just trying to get people, like you said, to adopt rather than to buy. I think we should revisit that issue of, trying to get pet stores to stop selling live animals, period, especially birds.
Yeah, I would be very happy for us to potentially prepare a separate presentation and session on that topic, because I know even outside of Mickaboo, there are other smaller rescues operating in the area who feel very strongly about this also. It is definitely a factor in how many birds end up needing to be rehomed through just impulse buys, lack of awareness, lack of information provided at the point of sale, lack of good husbandry information, poor care leads to health problems, leads to surrender. It's a really vicious cycle. And realistic expectations are very important with these animals. They're very different than other kinds of animals people keep at home. So I would love to pursue those efforts. And we definitely have an appetite for that. So I think that's worthy of an agenda item.
Agreed. Thank you so much for your comments and for your presentation, Sarah. Before we move on to the next item, are there any other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, thanks again, Sarah, for everything. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the Roxy.
Thank you. We'll see you there. Looking forward to it. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, great. Before we move on to the next business item, I did want to mention, I forgot to mention, or to acknowledge that we did have some written public comments. Those public comments can be found under communications received on our website for the agenda page for this meeting. One of the comments, the person did comment in person, but there was also another comment from a Maggie commenting about about raticides and the effect they have on birds, and also concerning the commission name change. So anyways, again, those comments are located on our website.